This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com. One of the most legendary figures in all of wrestling, Ole Anderson, passed away yesterday at the age of 81. He definitely had a lot of enemies. He was very outspoken. Good promo, legendary feud in Georgia Championship Wrestling with Dusty Rhodes. So legendary that even when Ole turned face later on, he never feuded with Dusty. They still kayfabed the intensity of their feud when Ole was a heel there. His peak time as a booker and wrestler was from about 1976 to 81. At one point, he was booking and the Carolina and Georgia's championship wrestling at the same time, which would have been a huge task. Of course, him and his partner Gene Anderson were probably the most famous team from the Carolinas, and that was a big tag team territory, particularly in the early 70s when the Andersons were a top tag team. They were critical in getting Ric Flair over at the beginning as he was brought into the Carolinas, being their cousin from Minnesota, so it gave him instant credibility. They feuded with Ole and Gene feuded with Flair and Valentine. And then Ole had his own heated feud with Ric Flair in the Carolinas. Of course, Ole was later one of the original members of the Four Horsemen till he was replaced by Lex Luger. He was a good booker overall, but of course he made his mistakes. He always didn't think Hogan had talent, and he stood by that. He didn't think Savage had talent. He didn't like Bobby Heenan either. Apparently, they had big heat because he had told Bobby Heenan that he was going to be in Georgia Championship for a long time, told him to buy a house in the territory. Then, after Heenan had bought a house, he was fired about a month and a half later. So Heenan always held that against him. A lot of people made allegations he was racist, even though he pushed a lot of black wrestlers, such as Tony Atlas. He definitely used racist terms, which a lot of wrestlers did at the time. Um, how deep his racism was, I don't know. He definitely used the N word a lot. That's from enough people. He owned a sawmill outside of wrestling. He did book for WCW for a while. What I remember him best for was growing up being the voice of Black Scorpion as well as the Shockmaster. He definitely lost his touch as booker by the time he was booking WCW. However, I still like those days of WCW better than the product today. Of course, there was the famous story when he was one of the main investors of Georgia Championship Wrestling of the Briscoes going behind his back to sell their stock in Georgia Championship Wrestling to Vince McMahon, allowing Vince to put his show on TBS, taking over from Ole's show. But in the end, Ted gave Ole Anderson his show back due to bad ratings. And he wrestled mostly in the Carolinas and Georgias in his career. He made pretty good money. He saved his money well. I did hear an interview with him, which I think Ricky Morton did. And he said Vince offered him a very good position at one point, and he was very rude to Vince about taking the position. And that was something he later regretted because he didn't believe that Vince would become such a monster that he ultimately ended up becoming. And feel free to write your memories of Ole in the comments. Ole had heat with just about everyone. I know Ray Rougeau didn't mind him. He was a good wrestler as far as believability and promos. He was an underrated promo. Piper's doing great, Mike. R.I.P. Ole Anderson. Definitely a entertaining character.